Recently, I was interviewed by somebody I would consider a very close friend and neighbor, an incredible entrepreneur, Alison Prince. She has built a very amazing business teaching people how to start a company from scratch and really grow it into something that can provide freedom and travel and opportunities for their family. And so she does an exceptional job. I have to say, this is one of my favorite interviews because she knows her audience very, very well. She's not afraid to challenge the ideas and concepts that I'm presenting, which ultimately just allows us to go a lot deeper. And it was the first time that I was publicly talking about the system that I was using as a young entrepreneur, and then therefore have been sharing with my high-end VIP clients. And so if you've been curious about that process, how to apply it, what this is all about, then you need to hop into today's conversation. I'll see you in the conversation.
Katie, I'm so glad you are here. We talked a little bit before we started about this topic, and I think everybody is going to have this on repeat. I love that you're here with us. Thank you for taking the time out of the beautiful Puerto Rico sunny day to meet with me for this podcast episode.
This is an honor. You know, I'm super pumped to be here.
Will you give everybody a little bit about your background? I know about it.
Sure.
Like, you're on a pedestal with a crown. Will you just let everybody know so they can put you on that pedestal too?
Yeah. So long story short, I was a design student who got married in college, did pretty well in school, got a scholarship from General Motors, get married. And my husband and I do the same thing. He's also a product designer. And so he was out in the product design world and we started having kids. And there was a part of me that felt like I loved motherhood and, you know, there were great things about it, but there was a part of me that felt like there's a piece of me that's not really being developed. So I started a company, not really imagining where it would go. And, you know, this was like my little thing that I did when my kids were napping, but pretty quickly, Alison, that little thing turned into a multi-million-dollar international company with distribution in 26 different countries. We got featured on the Ellen Show, the Rachael Ray Show, the Today Show. So that's like the highlight. I exited that company 6 years ago, sold that brand. And from there, I shifted into coaching, business coaching, because I didn't as I was building my business, I didn't have an MBA, but I knew design. And what's really fascinating is that almost became my competitive advantage. And, you know, I wasn't running ads, and yet I gained over 1 million customers just in like the first 4 years. 1 million customers, 0 ads. Like, how does that happen?
Crazy.
And it happened by design. And so I'm at this place in my life where I have built the life that the Katie of 18 years ago almost couldn't even fathom. Mm-hmm. Because 18 years ago, as I was starting the company, it felt like what I wanted was incompatible because I wanted success in business, right? And fulfillment that came with achieving my goals and getting to express my talents. And I also wanted a deep, loving relationship. I was madly in love with my husband, and I wanted to continue to be madly in love with my husband. And I saw as the business grew, how it was creating tension between us. Mm-hmm. And then I also loved my kids, and I saw how the business would pull me away from my kids. And I also loved God. And so as I was building my business, as it was taking off, I was like, all of these worlds are incompatible. It's not possible for me to accomplish all of this. And God put a new thought in my mind at that time, which was, Katie, you know creation. So while you might not see the woman who's capable of navigating all of this complexity, you don't need that woman. You can create her. And so it became this journey of, rather than just building a business, it became this journey of creating a woman who's capable of navigating the complexity of these seemingly incompatible worlds. And so today, my life is not perfect. And you know that, we're friends and neighbors. And yet, I think you can also confirm that that's my reality. I've been married almost 21 years. I've got 4 beautiful children. I love God, and I'm deeply committed to my spiritual journey. And I have a successful coaching practice. And so that's kind of my story. It was this unexpected journey of, I thought I was building a brand and products, and what I discovered along the way, and this was a very spiritual moment, was that the business was really a vehicle for me to become who God had created me to be. And so that really became my North Star.
That's so good. And I really love the fact that you went back 18 years ago and you looked at that Katie and she had no clue where
None.
you would be today. Like it wasn't even a speck of a thought in your mind. And you just started.
No.
You just started and you said, I'm just going to move forward. And it has led you to this, your forward motion, not overthinking, not overanalyzing, not waiting for big answers. You just started moving forward, knowing
Yes.
I'm good at design, but I'm not good at anything else. Or
Right.
I'm not quite as good
Right.
with everything else. Okay. I loved that you also said you can create her.
Mm.
That was very, very powerful. I want to
Yep.
go into a couple concepts in today's podcast episode that I really think that you are an expert at. And that is how you're really good at setting up systems. And I think that you're saying, you said like the whole design thing has been your superhero power. And so you're helping people design their businesses and their lives to be able to handle the stresses of life, motherhood, business, your faith, and all the other things, dinner, all the other things. So I'd love if you could share some of your systems. That's number one. But I do want to talk about, you said something else that piqued my curiosity, that you had 1 million customers and it happened by design. Will you expand into that a little bit more? And then we'll go into some of your top frameworks that you love to share with us business owners.
Yeah. You know, it's funny that you look at me in my life and you're like, Katie's good at systems, because for a long time, I didn't believe that I was. And, you know, as I was building my business, I don't like complexity. If something's complex, it's overwhelming to me. And so I have developed this ability to simplify things. And I did that in my first brand, Pudge. I do it today in my coaching practice. And so one of the things that I do with my clients today is I help them build out what's called a compass sketch. And it's taking all of the important lessons that I have learned in the 18 years of doing business, and it puts it into one sheet of paper. And what I have found is if I can tap into my natural desire and things that are meaningful to me in my business and allow my business to be an extension of that, I don't have to be the white-knuckled, hyper-disciplined individual, because I'm not her. I'm just not that person. And so if I can design the way I'm framing my business, and that's the key, designing the way that I frame my business and why I am doing the things that I'm doing in a way that it already aligns with what I want inside of me, then I'm not in an internal battle. I don't like internal battles. And so my compass sketch system is a way to design the way that you frame your business and define it so that it aligns with me internally and I'm not fighting my internal dreams and desires. So that's my compass sketch system, and includes things like, what are my 4 core values? What is my North Star? What is the meaningful message that I share, that when I share that onto the world, it has people getting chills and raising the hair on the back of their neck because it really means something to them too. It's also clearly identifying the vehicle that I'm inviting people to get into. And it gives me a chance to really get to know my ideal client, AKA the avatar, right? Who is that person? What's going on in their life? And then I actually have one right here. Let me just show it to you. Because like then it just like it's literally on a front and back of a piece of paper. And it goes into, you know, like, what's my goals for this quarter? Okay. If I want to be there in 90 days, where do I need to be in 60 days? If I want to be at that place in 60 days, what do I need to do in the next 30 days? So in one sheet of paper, I'm taking like all of the key elements I need to make decisions, to understand how I need to build my team, to even know how I need to focus my team. And, you know, as you build your business and you start having success, one of the kind of quote problems that starts to show up is you have too many opportunities. And so getting clarity through a compass sketch on where I'm going makes it so much easier to say no to things that ultimately are distraction. So that's one of my systems that I use. And it's interesting because for a long time, it was just kind of internal. It was how I made decisions. And then it wasn't until I started coaching that I saw that they were lacking definition in answering those questions. Like, why does that matter to you? And so I've developed it as a coach.
Can you give me a specific example of someone who does feel like they've got a lot of opportunities, they don't know where they're going, they're trying to figure out the lifestyle that they want, and was able to sit down and really just go into some of those things that you talked about, core values, North Star, meaningful message, and start to create her? Do you have an example of that?
Yeah, I've got a client right now. He's been working with me for about 2 months and, a like $5 million business. And he knows he wants to sell it someday, but it's a franchise. So he doesn't, there's parts of it that he owns, but he doesn't own the brand, and there's royalties. And he feels like he has a lot of this like pent up frustration. And so he's taught himself to kind of turn off his feelings, turn off his emotions. He's got a really good, I'm going to say, fake smile. And
I think we do that as entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
Everything's fine. Yeah. My legs cut off, but everything's fine. I haven't slept in 10 days, but everything's fine. Yeah.
And behind the scenes, he's a people pleaser on the front end, but behind the scenes, he's getting texts all throughout the day and in the evening, team members throwing problems at him. What do we do about this? He's responding to emails. In fact, when a customer calls their company, it goes to his cell phone. He's like answering the phone all day. And I'm like, holy cow, we need to change some things here. Like, there's an opportunity for you to take this business, level it up to a point where you have freedom to travel for weeks, maybe even months with your wife. And go and do the things that you want to do that feel exciting and fun to you, and where you're not just constantly hiding all of this frustration. So we're actively working on creating his compass sketch right now. And it's funny because in the beginning, when he started working with me, and I said, why do you want to sell your company? Because there's all different ways that you could sell your company and ways to value it and terms that you can get out of it. And it was interesting because he really hadn't even asked himself that question. Because my job is to help him design and negotiate the right deal for him, right? Right now, we're setting up the business to be able to get there, but I need to know where he's oriented, right? And if I don't know where he's oriented, then I can't help him. Like, I really can't. And when he came to me, he was like, almost like if I were to draw a circle and arrows going in every different direction, that was him when he came to me. And right now, we've been slowly collecting up that energy, those arrows that are pointing in every direction. We've slowly been collecting them up and focusing them and orienting him in one direction, so that when he works, he's moving in that same direction. Even when he takes time off, he's also moving in that same direction. It's not like he's being pulled in many different directions.
Okay. So I want to dive down into that a little bit, because you're saying, where are you oriented? I think, and a lot of people listen to my podcast, they're new entrepreneurs and they're trying to get to their first 6 figures and they don't know where they're oriented. And at first, a lot of them are money driven, which is beautiful. That's why there's money out there. It gives us a great motivation, the cookie, right? Or the carrot to go chase. Yeah. And so we're just trying to do everything. And they're like, I don't know where I'm supposed to be oriented because this is happening and this is happening. This is happening. How does someone find how to orient themselves?
Okay.
What they're wanting, if they're still confused on what they even want.
So I was an anti-planner for a long time because of what you're describing. I was
always a planner.
No, Allison, I was not. Didn't you hear my story? I was right there in the moment. I was like, I'm going to make, like, when I first started, I just made 50 of my product. And I sold it to one store. And I remember riding on my bike the next day. I was cycling at the time. And I was like over the moon. I couldn't even believe it that one of my products that I had created, that I had manufactured, was on a store shelf. And like, to me, that was the top. And I was like, I've made it. And I remember coming home later and talking to my husband. He was like, if that store wants your products, don't you think that 10 other boutiques in Portland would want your products? And it blew my mind. I'm like, whoa, hold on. I can grow this thing. And so I've taken that experience because in a lot of ways, the fact that I wasn't looking so far ahead and then being frustrated that I wasn't getting closer to that place, which I think oftentimes is where the scattered comes. It's like, we have this really big goal, and what it takes to get you there is like 27,000 steps, right? And so when you take the first 1,000, it's like, I'm not getting any closer. Well, yeah, you still have a long ways to go. And so what I tell entrepreneurs is, yes, we need that long-term goal and objective, but you need to walk back from that long-term goal and objective. In a way, you need to not look at a year from now. You actually need to kind of set that aside, but you need to know that what you're doing right now lines up with that. And so when it comes to creating goals and targets, I say, set a target that aligns with your North Star, but one that is just outside of your reach, especially in the beginning. It's got to be just outside of your reach, because if it's so far out of your reach, you're going to become discouraged and start to move into doubt and even hopelessness. And so I'll give you a really tangible example. We sold our company, and like, as we did it, I was excited to jump into coaching. But then when I was a full-time coach, it was like, all of a sudden I was hit with all of my false beliefs. Like, who do you think you are? The imposter syndrome type stuff. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden my internal voice was attacking me. And I felt like I didn't have any authority to coach somebody in their business, and that I wasn't a real businesswoman. Like, that's what I was dealing with every day inside of my head. Quick question for you. What would happen in your business and life if you could show up powerfully? As a coach to high-performing entrepreneurs, I help intelligent people like you do just that. And if you want to be inspired by people who are getting more done in 90 days than most people do all year, I'm going to invite you to go check out my case studies. The website is now.katierichardson.com/case study. And the cool thing is, we've got so many case studies there. You can find an entrepreneur who's just like you. I've also got a link for you down in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. And my husband, as I was like looking at my season, and I was like, I want to do, like, I didn't know what my target should even be. This was my first time that I'd been a full-time coach. And he says to me, well, what if you try to do $100,000 in the next quarter? And I'm like, $100,000? What are you talking about? That's nuts. That's crazy. And so what did I do? I pulled it back, and I was like, you know what feels achievable, but like just outside of reach, but kind of fun to try and go after? 25K. Maybe I could do 25K in the next quarter. Allison, I hit that 25K in the first 30 days, and I ended up hitting 75K in the quarter. So I think for me, like, the fact that it felt so achievable, it excited me, it energizes me, and it had me driving towards that rather than feeling like it was so overwhelming that there's no way I could do that.
I love that. I love setting a goal, and it's one that I can smash in about half the time frame.
Yeah,
that I set it, because I'm like, oh, I did it. I did it. Sure, I have in my mind like that thought, but you're right. I set it aside, and then I put one down just out of my reach, and then I love to smash it a lot faster. And
yeah,
it builds your confidence.
Totally. The analogy that I use with my clients is, it's like those posters that they used to have in the malls in the 90s. Totally forgetting what they're called. They're like an ugly but computer generated, repeated patterns. Nothing makes sense. Do you know which stereograms, I think is what they're called? Anyways, it's the poster that you look at. When you look at it, you only see the ugly poster. But if you look through it, all of a sudden this incredible 3D image pops up. And in a way, that's what we need to do. We don't want to focus on that long-term goal. Don't focus on it, because you won't see the beautiful opportunity that's in front of you.
I love that. I love that. Okay. So you were talking about how you didn't plan, and now you're more of a planner. Do you want to go into a little bit detail? I know we just talked about taking your big goal, but can you break that down a little bit more?
Yeah. so part of what allowed me to shift from being an anti-planner to a planner is acknowledging it was my design, actually, like recognizing that my plan was my first prototype and that it was going to change. But the only way I could change it and improve it and make it better was to make a first draft. And so that's why my planning system is called a compass sketch. It's a sketch. It's something that we can tweak and shift and change. So Jordan Peterson says something, the reason we make a plan is because it's going to fail and we need to make a new one, something like that. I'm not quoting him perfectly, but it's like, we need that thing to tweak. So if you don't make any sort of a plan, then there's nothing to tweak. There's nothing to improve. So that is what kind of allowed me, because before then I was just frequently in the chaos of being an anti-planner.
That makes so much sense. I love Jordan Peterson. You introduced me to who he was. I know I'm a little behind with that. But the reason we make a plan is we have something to tweak.
Yeah.
That's so powerful. So powerful. Okay. How many compass moments have you had? Because you started on a bicycle, 50 products to one store, and then you built that company. And was that the bathtub?
Yes, it eventually became the bathtub. What I was selling to stores was a cut and sew product. It was a baby sling.
Okay. And then your next product, was it Pudge? Or did you have a couple in between? Pudge. Okay. How many times have you had to come back to your compass and say, hang on, it's changing a little bit?
Oh, 1,000 times. Like when I got started, I actually did have a different company called Zoo Modern. And I got into about 25 stores with that. And that's when I did start to look more down the road. And I was like, what if this could go international? I saw a potential trademark conflict in France, talked to my brother who was an attorney, and he was like, you should change it. And like, I fought that in my head for 3 days. And I finally was like, okay, fine. He's right. I probably should change it. And what's cool is I'd had enough experience at that point to be more intentional in naming the brand. So then my compass sketch changed then, and I changed the brand. And it went really well. And I could own that trademark. I could own puj.com. Like, that's kind of crazy. And that worked really well. But there's always going to be times where it's going to tweak and change. I think for a long time, as somebody who grew up really religious and were trying to become perfected in Christ, I interpreted that as you need to make every right decision. And if you don't, it all falls apart. And so I was always terrified of making the wrong choice. And what I didn't realize, Alison, is I was disempowering me in that moment. Our power comes from our agency, from choosing. And if we can learn to access that, develop that ability to make decisions, they're not going to be perfect. But the game then becomes about learning from all of my decisions and then course correcting. Like, nobody on earth is perfect. So if you're playing that game, you're not living in reality, and reality will win every time.
Will you go into that a little bit more? Because you've been in the e-commerce space. Yeah. I love the e-commerce space as well. And I have a lot of people say, I just have to get this first one right. And it puts them in a state of paralysis. Do you want to talk about how to allow yourself to be messy and not, I see this happen a lot of times. People will put their identity, they attach it to their product. And so if their product fails, they think they're a failure.
Oh yeah.
And that could be further from the truth.
Right.
So how do you coach someone who's stuck in that?
Yeah. So your product is ready when you get it to the point where it's a minimally viable product. Okay. And how do you even know when you're at that point? Before I create a product, I identify a problem that I'm trying to solve with that product. There has to be a reason for this product to exist. So what is the problem that this product needs to solve? And when your product, as you're developing it and you're going through multiple iterations, when it's at the point where it solves that problem, then you need to put it out there into the world. Why? Not because it's perfect, because you actually need it to improve even more. And at that point, the only way it's going to improve even more is once it's in the hands of your customers, because you're going to learn even more about it once it's in the hand of your customers. Now, do I do multiple prototypes and then bring in a test group and have them test that. Yeah, like my very first prototype was so raw. It had Sharpie all over it. I'd cut it with scissors. It was a piece of foam that we had cut with scissors. It was all jaggedy. And we had literally created a closure system from some hair ties and wood beads that I'd gotten from girls' camp when I was 16. And like, that was the prototype. And I had my neighbors using it because they just had a baby. And I'm like, will you test out this baby bathtub for me? And she had it for a week, and I walked across the street to go get it back from her. And she was clinging to it. And she was like, wait, you need this thing back? Alison, it was hideous, but it was doing the thing it was designed to do. So it was valuable to her. That's when I knew we had something. So you've got to create a minimally viable product. And honestly, cash flow is key in the e-commerce space. So you have to do it in a very financially efficient way. When I'm making prototypes, I pull out my recycle bin and I'm using yogurt lids and tin foil. Like, I'm serious. And you make your first few prototypes using scraps from your recycle bin, because you're going to learn some incredible things. Some people have this idea that pops up in their mind and they go hire an engineer and pay him $50,000. I'm like, hold on. You don't even know if that works. You don't even know if it does the thing that you think it does while it's floating around in your head. So you've got to start to bring it into reality in some form, sketching it on paper, grabbing things out of the recycle bin, and start utilizing it. And once it gets to that point where you have that minimally viable product that you can afford, that's when you do it. And like us, we had to create tools and in Asia to start production of our product. And it's kind of a miracle story, honestly, because we had done it stateside, really scrappy. They weren't great, but we were able to kind of prove the concept. And then we got some first samples from Asia, but we didn't have the tool yet, but they sampled it for us. And then we took it to a trade show, and so many people loved it. We got enough purchase orders that we called our factories in Taiwan. We're like, okay, make the tool. We can buy it now. And it's not easy to sequence it, but you have to do it this way. Otherwise, you'll get yourself into a world of hurt where you've tooled a product that nobody wants because it doesn't even work. You didn't even test it out.
Yes. And it goes back to what you said with the reason we make a plant, the reason we make a prototype, the reason we make an MVP is so that we have something to tweak.
Yes. Yeah.
It goes for everything. It is so much easier to change direction if you are moving than to just get started. So just get started. I love that you're pulling out yogurt containers from the trash.
Yeah.
Do you have a picture of that still?
I need to. I do. I do. I'll send you one.
I would love,
because I even as I was doing it, I was doing stuff with my kids at the table. They were at the table with me, and it's really cool. We turned a traditional milk jug into this elephant hat. So the handle is the nose, and they had it on their head, and the yogurt lids were the ears of the elephant. I'll send you that photo.
I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another key thing that you said that I totally agree with, no matter if you're selling other people's products, let's say you're not the manufacturer working with manufacturers, you're just wholesaling, any type of product that you sell, can you start off with a pre-sale? Can you sell it before you even have it in hand? Do you want to talk about why that was? I mean, we learned a little bit the cash flow is king, but why? And then people, they didn't have your product yet. And so weren't you like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how this product's really going to look. How did you work through that mental process? If I'm selling this product to these people and I don't even really have it yet, how's it going to turn out on the end? How'd you get the confidence to do that?
Well, what's interesting is I did things the way that I did, but it's not what I would recommend to people, because the likelihood that the stars would align the way that they did, and then all of a sudden you're in 2,000 stores in 26 different countries, the chances of that happening are just zero. And it was excruciating to make it happen. So what I say to people is start selling something, and put your brand on it and start developing the brand first. And then you'll have the cash flow and the money and the list to now sell your really unique product. So that's the first thing I would say. I wouldn't recommend anybody go do it the way that I did it.
That's so interesting that you say that, because you take the lessons and be like, listen, that was too big of a risk. We got really lucky. And so you're saying, we just got lucky. Do it this way. This way is better.
Yeah. And it wasn't all luck. Like I worked my tail off to make that happen. And there were elements of luck, maybe divine intervention. I don't know, Allison, but the likelihood. So you're talking about how did you get the confidence? Let me share a quick story. So at the trade show so I had taken my product, the prototype, to a trade show in New York, and I came home with 0 orders. I was crushed. I was ready to give up. They asked me all these questions and I didn't know the answers to them. And so I thought that meant they don't like me. They don't like Katie as a designer. And in that moment, I came home seriously broke in. And Ben pulled me into the garage because kids were going crazy. He pulls me into the garage to kind of hear how it went. And I was like, they don't want it. And he was like, what do you mean? And so he starts asking me all these questions. And I confessed to him how they asked me, what's the wholesale price? What's the retail price? What are your lead times? Do you carry insurance for this thing? What is a case pack minimum? And I was like, and I didn't like, they all told me no. And he was like, Katie, he paused for a moment. He was like, Katie, they didn't tell you no. They asked you questions that we just didn't have the answers to. So we just need to answer those questions. So answer those questions, then they'll all buy. Answer those questions and we'll be shipping this product all over the world. Katie, you didn't fail. You brought us home the perfect blueprint to success. And so that is what we did. Like it was so crazy at that point, Allison. We were living on food storage. I was driving my husband's car from college with 3 car seats squished into the back seat. And it was just so embarrassing. All my friends were upgrading to the latest minivan. And, they had new couches in their house and I had my in-laws' basement couches in my house. And so it was just like, it was a very difficult time. But I made the decision to keep going. And I was like, there's a part of me that I look 5-10 years into the future. And if I look back at this moment, there's a part of me that would regret if I didn't keep going. So I kept going. We go to this trade show in Las Vegas, and now everyone's buying it. And guess what? What I wasn't expecting is now I've freaked out again. And I'm like, crap. What if they find out I don't know what I'm doing? And I was terrified at the trade show. Ben pulls me out of the booth and he's like, hey, where's Katie? And I'm like, what do you mean, where's Katie? I'm like putting on the fake happy face. What do you mean, where's Katie? And he was like, you're not engaging with people. You're pushing them off onto me and to Diana. What's going on? And I cracked open and I started crying. And I was like, they all believe it. I made up this brand, created this product, and they all think it's real. And pretty soon they're going to find out I have no idea what I'm doing. And like, it's all going to fail. And he was like, Katie, nobody's expecting you to be something that you're not. They just need you to be Katie. So be Katie and ask them if they want 25 or 50 tubs. And Allison, before that moment, I had been trying to be a quote, real businesswoman. What is that? I don't know. It wasn't even defined. I was trying to be something that I'm not, right? A fake, a fraud. And what he did for me in that moment is he helped me remember who I am. And all of a sudden that noise in the back of my head that was shouting at me as I was trying to talk to somebody, I couldn't even hear them. My brain was shouting at me so loud. All of a sudden that dissipated. And it was like, oh, I have a gentleman in front of me who's asking me questions about my product. I'm talking to this guy. And it was almost immediately after I'm talking to this guy. And pretty soon he was like, what's your background? He starts asking me questions. Turns out he thought I was an incredible saleswoman and a negotiator. He was the CEO of Carter's. He was extremely impressed. And I'm like, holy cow, how did that happen? I flipped the switch from believing I had to be something I wasn't to being Katie. I know who she is. She likes people. She likes solving problems. She's actually interested in you. She listens. And so as I aligned with that voice that made me feel like I was a fake dissipated. So that's where I found my confidence. And I still have to do this today, Allison, like who I believe I am. So that core belief of who I believe I am gets turned into those voices. And so I actively work on who do I believe that I am so that I can like influence those voices in my head.
And it changes.
It changes 100%.
Katie of 18 years ago is not the Katie of today. And you have to change. One thing that, going back to the luck, I believe your luck increases when you show up. If you didn't make that prototype, if
100%.
you didn't get to the garage crying, or Ben's like, and I loved what you said about this, your customers' questions are the perfect blueprint to success. You wouldn't have been in the right place at the right time for the rep of Carter's to say, I'm interested. Like everything leads up to it.
Mhm.
And your
Yeah.
luck increased because you put in the work.
100%.
So good.
Yeah.
Okay. We're out of time, but where can people find you? And will you post that picture on your Instagram story so people can come find it?
Yeah.
Have your
Yeah.
first prototype?
Yeah. So I'm most active on Instagram, katie.live. And then I also have a podcast. It's called What's Working Now, where I kind of deconstruct the core principles of what's working for other entrepreneurs. And I think it's an extension of my design. I really want to understand first principles. And if I can understand those, then I can take that and I can apply it to lots of areas of my life. And it's been cool as you kind of have exposed that on this show today. So send me a DM, send me a message. I love talking to people. I mean that. I'm the one active in my DMs. So send me a message. I'd love to hear from you.
Katie, you're such a blessing to everybody listening. And of course, to me personally, so grateful for everything that you shared, from your compass framework to just some deep things that we need to talk about, or that we need to think about, so that we can truly live the life that we want to live and not just be so stuck because we forgot to plan, and where our business becomes our prison. We don't want that. We want to go have a guided compass to show us where to go. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. You're welcome, Alison. It's been super fun.